So who here is an addict? All right. I love you already. So this is a dream. I don't know what else to say. This is amazing. So my mom started a recovery about 30 years ago. She's why I'm here. So you'll hear her a bit as we go through this talk. So who's heard of relapse prevention? Who thinks that sounds awful? It's just cold. You know, and so we wanted to bring life to recovery. Like, who wants to recover if it's not fun? You know, and so that's what we do. We bring this like bright light to recovery, and that's really what our goal is. So we came up with recovery protection, and it's a different approach, and I think it gives people the opportunity to enjoy preventing a relapse, right? Because if it's not fun, are we going to do it? Why did we do drugs, right? Because they changed the way we thought and we felt. That's why I did them. Actually, Eric Clapton was interviewed in 60 Minutes, and the guy interviewing said, so heroin was your first drug? And he says, no, it was sugar. I was 5 years old. Bread and butter with sugar and wafers, and Russell Brand talks about the chocolate wafers when he was a kid in his book, Recovery. This is a drug, and we need to treat it like a drug. So I'm going to take you through a stackable 3-tool system, and then we're going to do some work together. So you'll find cards, stack of cards in the middle of your desk. If you can't find Karen, she's got her hands up. She's got some extras over there, and we're going to be doing something together. So we're going to do some work, because I think that's the work is what gives us the freedom. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a trigger-free triangle. So we came up with this to help people first identify the foods that are triggers for them, but it actually can go much deeper than that. So we're going to talk about debate. Who's been in an aisle in a grocery store and ever debated? Come on, where are the hands? There they are, all right? And who's been in an aisle in the grocery store, eyeing your drug food, wondering, should I or shouldn't I, right? Then we're going to talk about romance, that longing, that lust, the rendezvous. Have you ever eaten foods and hidden them in the trash? Or just, it's like a lustful thing, right? And the guilt that follows the drug, right? How long does the pleasure really last? If you're a late-stage addict like me, not long. And then you're right into the guilt. So basically, what we can do is we can use these things to identify the things that are dangerous for us. So should I eat it? Should I not eat it? That deadly question, right? So I hate to break it to you. The answer is no. You shouldn't eat it, right? And the romance, the planning. I went to Nashville like 5 years ago, and every single item on my itinerary was about food. Every place I went was about food because I'm an addict. That's what I do. So it becomes this ingrained in how we think and how we live, and the guilt. Does it make you feel ashamed? Does it make you feel worthless or like a failure? If it does, it's a drug. So basically, debate is playing with matches. Romance is seeing how close you can get to the flames. And guilt is getting burned. Who's been burned before? It's always going to burn you, folks. It's always going to burn you. We forget, though. And we forget. And that's why this is so important to go through. So just here really quick, debate, asking yourself, should I, shouldn't I? Romance, the planning in advance, the rendezvous, and guilt, that worthless sense of failure after we've done it. So that's the first tool. That's the trigger-free triangle. Okay. The 3 Ps, and this goes down to my mom, and now my grandmother was dying. She was on her deathbed. She was on palliative care. And I was in high school, and my mom's getting ready to go so we can watch her pass. And she gets a cooler, a couple ice packs. She starts weighing and measuring her vegetables and her meats. I'm like, what are you doing? She says, I'm protecting my recovery. Wow. That's what it takes, guys. So we need to figure out what is it going to be for you to protect your recovery. You don't need to protect my recovery. I do. You need to protect your recovery. So it comes with the planning, preparing, and protecting. We're going to walk through these 3 things so you really understand the importance of it. Okay, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. If you don't do the steps that you need to do to get to where you want to be, you can't get there. It's that simple. You don't go on a road trip without putting gas in your car, do you? It's the same thing. You're going to get an oil change. You're going to make sure your wipers are clear, right? You're going to get ready for your trip, and you're going to prepare. You're going to pack up your car. You're going to put in your suitcase. You're going to remember your toiletries. You're going to do all these things. And that's going to protect your experience on your trip. It's going to make sure that when you get there, you have what you need to do what you want to do, which is hopefully to have a good time. So to prepare is to make ready or able to deal with or do something, right? It's the steps that we need to take to make sure that it becomes possible for us to engage in the activities that will ensure that we protect your recovery. I feel like there's one missing here. No. Oh, so I missed plan. Planning is very important. You can't prepare without a plan. It's like, I don't know if you've heard Jordan Peterson talk about the stupid plan. We've been doing a lot of this stuff in the village that I run, right? A stupid plan is you figure out where you want to go, and then you sit for 5 minutes and you figure out what are the steps that you need to do to get there. You don't need to be right. You just need to do what you said you're going to do. And then you fail specifically, you'll succeed specifically, and you'll adjust your plan. So the plan isn't set in stone. It's the best idea that you have right now. And then you engage in that plan. And that goes to the preparation, which we just talked about. Sorry, out of order, I got too excited. And then that enables you to protect your recovery. All the things that you've been working on building up until now. That is the point. Okay, now, so we know about the triangle. We know about the 3 Ps. The 3 Cs are really, it's kind of our take on a sort of a CBT-based model, but it's basically what triggers you, what you do, what happens. Because usually, as addicts, if you're anything like me, well, you had a cue, and then you ate your drug, and then you had a result as a result of eating the drug, which usually stunk, right? It wasn't where you wanted to be. So by breaking it down this way, we can see that the cue is a stimulus that sets off the event. The custom is what you do when you're triggered, right? And the consequence is the result of what happens after you've done the behavior or action or the substance. That's your cue, right? So a cue could be anything. Like, believe it or not, I was trained as an artisan bread baker. Not so helpful as an addict. But the point is that my wife was in the kitchen and she was like schlepping butter across toast. And I work right next to the kitchen. And I'm triggered. I'm like trying to work. I'm like helping addicts and like here, like, right? So it could be a sound. It could be a smell. It could be a time of day. It could be a place. It could be a person. It could be anything. So we really need to be on guard for this stuff and really take an inventory of what are our cues, right? Because they have to be personal to us. And so we have to be grateful for our triggers. Bottom line, they give us information. Bitten talked about that. What does a relapse give you? It gives you information. Then you can become responsible to do something based on the information that you have, right? That's empowering. That's recovery. A custom, that's the repeated thing that you've done, right? Doing the same thing you've always done, and then you end up with the, oh jeepers. Then you end up with the same results. That's my alarm to wake my kids up. Okay. Believe it or not, there's another one in 15 minutes. We'll get there in a second. So basically, look at this time of day, right? Lots of people get tired around 3 p.m. Jeepers, that's right about now, isn't it? So what do we do? Well, some of you probably got some coffee or some tea, right? We get a fix. We get something that's going to change the way we think or feel, right? And then what's the consequence? Maybe you feel ashamed. Maybe you're saying to yourself, God, why did I do that again? I knew it was going to happen and I did it anyway. So, right, we can change the custom and then we can change the consequence. So instead of grabbing a fix, why don't you take a walk outside? Why don't you get yourself in nature? Do something different and you'll get something different. Okay. Because when you change your custom, you change your consequence. And when you change your consequences, you change your life. And that's what we want to do, right? You can't live the way you lived before. It's not going to work. You need to do something different. All right, so now we're going to play, right? So we do a lot of this in circle. It's called working alone together. So I want you to go ahead and grab your cards. Okay, you need to make sure that, actually, before you do that, just grab a blank piece of paper. All right, believe it or not, as soon as I hit this arrow, a timer is going to start. You're only going to have 60 seconds to do this. So this is the prompt that you're going to have for the timed exercise. So you're going to say to yourself, I know my recovery is in trouble when I ... You're just going to blast off answers as fast as you possibly can.
On the paper.
On the blank paper, yes. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. It's just your recovery and when you know it's in trouble. So I'm going to wait for this folks to sit down in case they didn't have it. Then ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, you got a minute. I'm going to shut up. It's not playing. It's a PDF. I'll just use my timer. Sorry, it's a PDF, so I forgot. So just keep going. Don't stop and look at the timer.
Concentrate.
We'll give it 20 more seconds. Just keep writing till you can't write anymore. All right, as my client Anna as my coworker Anna would say, this is good enough for government work, so we're just going to move on. All right, so you're going to pull out your cards. You're going to make sure that you see in front of you the top card here, not the bottom. So there's two sides, right? There should be a 1 in the bottom right corner of your card. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to give you 30 seconds. You're just going to pick a cue from your list. One that you feel you could do something about would be ideal. And then you're going to write it in the cue line on the first side and on the back side of the card. So all you have to do is pick a cue, write it down on the cue line on both sides of the card. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. If you're done, show me your pen. All right, we're about half there. This doesn't have to be pretty to work. That's the good thing. Okay? Now, think about your cue. Is it debate? Is it guilt? Or is it romance? Maybe it's all three. That's okay. Just circle the ones that apply. If you're not sure, circle debate. Trust your gut too. Sometimes we overthink things. Let me rephrase. As addicts, we always overthink things. So it's the interesting thing about addiction, right? It's really pirating our mind from an instinctive part of our brain. So we really have to trust our knowing to kind of get past that and start to build this. The blue dog Bitten was talking about, that's the prefrontal cortex. That's the human brain. It's a very capable part of our brain, but if you can't reach it, it's useless to you. That's why you can't think your way out of addiction. You have to work your way out of addiction. You have to do stuff. Okay. Now, the custom. So, when you're in your queue, what do you normally do? What happens? What's your behavior? Not what the result is, but what is the thing you do following your cue. And just write it down. No wrong answers. And now, what's the result of the behavior that you've done, that you've written on your card? Where does that take you? What is the consequence? Kind of dig deep here. It's not just that you drug or that you... Where does that take you? What kind of state are you in? What is your thinking like? What are your feelings like? Get like visceral and gutsy, and because we don't want to go here, right? We don't want to go back there. Pain is the thing that motivates us as addicts sometimes. Get into that. It'll teach you something. All right, now you're going to flip your card over. Right? Now we're going to play with the 3 Ps a little bit. Right? So basically what we're going to have you do is how will you plan, how will you prepare, and how will you protect when you get this trigger or cue? Basically, what you going to do about it. You can always elaborate on your plan too, but the point is that if you have a numbered system that you would implement, you would just do those things in order. And that's going to take you further away from your trigger, closer to your recovery, right? Relapse and recovery happen on a paradigm, right? You have recovery over here and relapse over here. And you have to work your way away from recovery in order to work your way towards relapse. So by doing these actions, you're working your way from relapse back towards recovery, back to where you want to go. It's possible for someone to be in a relapse for a very long time before they pick up a drug. Happens more often than you think. That's why we want to work our way backwards. All right. So you did your planning, preparing, you did your protecting. What's the consequence of those 3 things? Where does that get you? How do you feel? What state are you in? What are the words that you would use to describe what that feels like? This is the reality, folks. Your recovery has to solve the problem your addiction creates. It's that simple. It has to solve all of the problems that your addiction creates. And guess what? Your red dog will morph. It'll do whatever it has to do to make you miserable. Not even kill you, just make you miserable. Right? So we need to stay on top of this. And that's why this isn't something you do once. Right? I just recently moved. I have 2 young kids, right? I don't have the triggers I used to have. I have a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. She doesn't play independently. Like, she doesn't want to. It drives me nuts. Like, that's a trigger. That wasn't a trigger when I didn't have a 3-year-old. So it's something, it doesn't have to be like so close to the drug. It just can be anything that you feel a little off about. And by taking an inventory, you really know what your recovery has to be made of. Because if you miss one of these things, it could potentially lead to relapse, right? Right? Because you're not protecting your recovery. So it's important to take an inventory. So the other thing I wanted to tell you is that we have a free event. It actually starts on Monday. I'm not even going to be there because I'm going to be in an airplane. Basically, it takes you through our system. And the final day is pretty much this. It's Recovery Protection 101. We call it Staying Stopped. So if you have any questions or you're interested, just find me or one of my people at the table over there. They can give you some information. And I wanted to give some time to answer questions. I know there's not a ton of time left. So shoot, I guess.